Hi, I'm Phil Higgins. I'm our customer service and inside sales manager here at Easy Pro Pond Products. And today we're going to be talking about water quality in all sizes and types of ponds. I prefer to hear from the experts. So let me introduce you to Cheryl Radomski, who's been with Easy Pro since the 1900s.
Hello.
And she has built a wealth of pond knowledge over the years and is a simply remarkable resource for us here at Easy Pro. We also have Sal Adams. He's only been with Easy Pro for a couple years now, but he has about a dozen years of experience as a lake and pond management technician, where he worked in the field identifying and treating water quality and vegetation issues all over the state of Michigan. So with that, we're going to turn it over to them and we're going to talk about some water quality issues here.
Thank you, Phil, for that kind introduction of us. Yeah, so as he'd mentioned, Cheryl and I, we've been doing this for a little while. We've been able to obtain a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience doing this stuff. Looking at specifically where we're at, it's starting to get warm outside. Water bodies are starting to get warm, whether it be koi ponds or we're looking at lakes and ponds, the larger scale. Things are starting to get warm. Number one most prevalent thing that happens when the warm starts to come around, algae, as you can see in this pond here behind us. There's several different types of algae. You're looking at filamentous algae. You're looking at macroalgae, such as Chara, starry stonewort. You're looking at planktonic algae. You're looking at cyanobacteria and more of the toxic algae. So let's talk about filamentous algae. So in my world, the larger world of bigger ponds and lakes, there's a lot of filamentous algae. I know it's that way in your world too. What do you run into with koi ponds?
Filamentous algae, these deep green colors.
Yeah.
We don't usually worry about the cyanobacteria or Chara or starry stonewort. People can manually remove those little things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, filamentous algae is a headache, so it's decent.
Yeah. In lakes and ponds, oftentimes you're going to be using chelated copper, right? There's several different products that we use, Cutrine, Argos. We sometimes can get into the KT, things like that. Copper seems to be the best combatants for filamentous algae and planktonic algae, at least in my world. How is it for you?
Yeah, you want to stay away from that in water gardens. Koi and goldfish, and even rainbow trout, they're real sensitive to anything with a copper base. Then using a copper-based product in a pond that those fish can actually eat, like pond shell. So you want to avoid that. In the water garden world, you're looking at Algaway 5.4. You're looking at Green Clean, the powder and the liquid, and other peroxide or base products to kill the algae, and they're safe for the fish. So you don't have to worry about them.
Yeah, safety of fish, it's always everybody's concern. At least it should be. Overall health of the pond should be important to, or of the water body, I guess.
Yeah.
But fish safety, it's super important. I get a lot of questions about fish safety, and I'm always asking people, do you have trout? Do you have koi? Do you have goldfish? And if you don't have those in your typical pond setting or in a lake, as long as you're not directly spraying stuff right over top of beds, bluegill beds and things like that, these algicides, they're pretty safe.
Yep, and it'll always consult the dosage rate they recommend.
Yeah.
Generally, you're not treating more than a third of your pond at a time because you don't want everything to die in your pond at once, all your plant life, because a couple of days starts decomposing, oxygen levels drop, which is bad for your fish.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people call up, say, it killed my fish, all this algicide. No, the oxygen drop 5 days later, kills your fish. So treat a third at a time and wait usually about a week or so in between. That's on the big ponds. On the water gardens, you usually have aeration going, you have fountains and waterfalls, and the oxygen levels are pretty good. And you're not normally choked out with algae like you can get on the big ponds.
Yeah. Not as much movement in my world.
Right. Now planktonic algae, which is a single cell algae, turns your water pea soup green. That you definitely want to treat properly.
Mm-hmm.
In a big pond, it's a lot more difficult than a little pond.
Yeah.
At a little water garden, you can even put a UV light in and you can kill all the algae off that passes the light. Doesn't work on your filamentous algae because that never goes past the light. It's always attached to the rocks. But that green water, you can clear it up fast. On a big farm pond, though.
Yeah, big ponds, it's going to be a little bit more of a fickle mistress. You're going to want to make sure that you're doing more of a broadcast treatment. We always try to steer people away from treating more than half the pond at a time, and really we try to stay less than that, more like a third of a pond at a time. You're going to want to break it up into segments and really get good coverage over the areas that you're doing. Planktonic algae is not an easy one to tackle, but as long as you're using the right products, you're using an adjuvant, surfactant, kind of helps activate the products and activate that whole process of killing off the algae. As long as you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's, you're going to be off to a really good start. at least in the bigger
Do you
body
find that
water bodies.
the green water cycles out on the big pond after a while?
It takes a lot of time, but certainly not like it doesn't.
It doesn't really cycle out in a water garden,
That's
but
right.
I've had people with big farm ponds call up and, they're terrible for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then as this pond starts to, the ecosystem develops, it cycles out because there's other plants competing for the nutrients that the planktonic algae is using.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There's a lot more going on, and the natural occurrences kind of they do their thing and take over.
Yep. So it's not unusual for ponds to cycle.
Yep.
Water gardens are a little bit different because they're so small and compact that they don't really cycle. It is what it is. You've got to manage them a little bit more.
Talk
Now
about
you mentioned about cyanobacteria.
Yeah. I had
I'm
mentioned
not as
it.
familiar with that.
Yep, it's not a super common thing. It can happen. A lot of times, we're talking about toxic algae. People get worried. Typically, the algae you have, it's not toxic algae. Some concerns you're looking at when you do experience toxic algae is animals, right, and fish. If your dog goes and drinks toxic algae, we've got major issues, right? So it's really important that you're able to identify it, first of all. And if you think you might have one, you really got to contact the right folks. Your DEQ, local, lake and pond management companies can often help with that. A great way.
Conservation districts, can they help you?
Yeah, and there's several different avenues to go. But yeah, that's a great point. They can do that as well. A great way to kind of be able to decipher or identify what you're looking at is if it looks like somebody took a bucket of paint and dumped it in the water. We're talking baby blue in color, sometimes a little bit more of like a teal in color. If it looks like paint is in the water, it's always safest just to call and see, hey, is there a way that we can get this tested and try to find out what the next steps are going to be?
Macroalgae, starry stone.
Yeah, that's the two that we're going to run into most often.
Those are the ones that look like plants, and a lot of people I treat them with herbicide.
That's right. A lot of people call and they're like, man, I've got this weed, I can't kill it. I've thrown, diclot in it, I've thrown flumioxazin in it, I've done this, and I can't get it to die off. What's going on here? And it's not a plant. It's an algae. It's a Kara and starry stonewort. They're not easy to kill even when approaching it with the correct products, algicides, right?
Right.
But it can be managed. Like you said, it looks like a plant. It actually can grow. I've seen it grow all the way up through the water column in fairly deep water for what it is.
One of the identifiers, it just grows in a big mat across the bottom, comes up, and it's attached, but not rooted.
Yeah. So that's absolutely correct. There's not a root system in it, so it's not a plant. I've described it as like rolling hills.
And the stems are held, right?
Yeah.
And it breaks really easily.
It can.
And you definitely never want to rake it out.
That's right. It's really difficult for the average bear to be able to tell the difference. Starry stonewort, especially later in the season, it gets the stars on it, or a pretty good indicator that it's not Kara, it's starry stonewort. If you pull it out of the water and really squeeze it, starry stonewort will be like wildly green when you squeeze it. In terms of treating, you're generally going to want to use your algicides and be on the aggressive side. I hate to tell you to be more towards max label rate, but that's what you're going to have to be to kill it. There is a good point, and I know that you've mentioned this before. What happens to Kara later in the season?
It starts to calcify. Excellent, bro.
Yeah. So
It also darkens up a little bit. It's a little more brown than it was. Right green.
safe to say, later in the season, maybe August, September time, I've got a bunch of Kara. Probably shouldn't spray it. Throw my money away.
Yeah, you're throwing your money away.
That's
If
right.
you got new growth in there, it'll affect the new growth. That's not going to do anything to the old growth.
That's right. That's right. It's tough because Kara is super heavy. It's really tough to try to wrestle. If you got grandkids, you got children. Best thing to do late season: break that stuff out, pull it out, do everything you can to get it out. Unfortunately, don't let somebody tell you that you need to start spraying it late season. It's not going to work.
Well, once you pull it out, it's going to start growing again.
That's right.
So if it's bright green, you can treat it that because it doesn't have a calcifer.
That's right.
But the problem is, the more you rake it, the more you spread it.
That's right. All right. So we talked about a more reactive approach, right, with algicides and looking at management that way. Let's focus in a little bit more on some more proactive and all natural ways, right? A lot of times with koi ponds and smaller scale and even larger scale, there's a couple different ways that you can be more proactive, and you can kind of get away from, you know, those algicides that people
Right.
sometimes get a little bit finicky about. Let's talk about that.
Well, number one, proper aeration for any pond, and filtration, especially on the smaller ponds. You want to make sure you have a filter that's sized for the number of fish and the amount of water. A lot of times people get a filter size for their 1,000-gallon ponds, but they have 10 fish in there. 1,000-gallon pond filter is not going to filter 10 fish. So that's something that you can over-filter. I just tell people over-filter, you can't go off. And then
Makes sense.
regular bacteria treatments is going to compete vigorously with all the other plants and algae for the food source. By doing regular bacteria treatments, it's a natural product that's in your pond. You're just putting a larger number in, so they're working faster. And by treating regularly, you're keeping those numbers up, so it's doing a bang up job for you. And avoid cleaning your filters every week. They don't need to be cleaned unless they're clogged, because that's where your bacteria are making their home. If you go and you spray them off every week, you're washing out so much good stuff.
Yeah. I've heard before, and you know, I've shared with customers. There's other things that are available too. Something that we have here and that we can encourage: barley.
Yep. Barley, as it decomposes, it produces a chemical that inhibits algae growth. Some ponds it works really great, some ponds it doesn't, but it's a natural product and it's not going to harm your fish. And there are people that have had a lot of success with it. If you start off with a bale, you got to wait till that guy is decomposing to the point where it's getting really good and ugly. That's when it's starting to produce the extract or the chemical that is inhibiting the algae growth. We even fixed that. We've moved it along a step. We've got barley pellets, which you can put in instead, or you can just put the barley extract straight in. We sell that too.
Yeah.
And you just dose every week or so with that. And always use bacteria.
Yeah.
But those are natural things, so make sure you got the right number of fish, you got the right size filter, you're doing regular bacteria treatments, and using things like barley pellets or barley extract. So
Yeah, I think it's safe to say, really, it doesn't matter how big or how small your water body is. If you've got issues specifically with algae, whether it be cyanobacteria, you know, your macroalgae, filamentous algae, planktonic, you give Easy Pro a jingle, one of us is definitely going to be able to help you out with that.
and it's not a pool of water. It's an ecosystem.
That's right.
You have to give it what it needs to live, and you can't kill everything off and expect it to stay clean. You got to do a balance with it. Bacteria, aeration, treat it when you see it.
Thanks, Sal.
Yeah.
What is going on here? I see black, I see green, I see, you know, we just talked about cyanoalgae. You know, my dogs are swimming them all the time, duck hunting. I get leery around this stuff. And you said when it stinks, be cautious, but it just smells organic. Is that, what do we got going on here?
A little bit different smell, so I'm glad you pointed that out. This stuff here is dying off filamentous algae. This isn't a super concern. That smell that you're smelling, it kind of smells like a horse barn, you know, like a cow pasture. It doesn't smell good. It's organic. When you're looking at that cyanobacteria and you're smelling that stuff, it's more of like almost like a chemically smell. It's a lot stronger. It almost burns to smell it. It doesn't smell like this stuff does. If you smell it and it smells, you know, like I say, kind of like a cow pasture, it's more likely that it's not cyanobacteria. If it's smelling, you know, a little bit more like hairspray, and not exactly, but you know, got that weird smell burning a little bit to it, that's when you really need to be concerned.
That track, because my dogs do come home from swimming smelling like cow manure, but they're still kicking, so it's definitely not the cyano.
Yeah, that's right. I left my paper at the office. You're in charge, director.
Oh, are you kidding me?
Nope.
You left that over there?
Yep.
But that smells and sounds like bull.